Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see you again, and welcome back to Lessons by the Lake, the Oswego Private Wealth Show. I'm your host and moderator, Ryan Ruff. It's great to be back with everyone, as we typically do on this show. We're going to dive into a wealth management-related discussion. Of course, I'm going to be joined by my right-hand man, Bob Bedreitis, Managing Director over at Oswego Private Wealth. And, we've got a great guest that's going to be joining us as well on the show today. We have Adi Klevit. She is joining us from Business Success Consulting Group, the founder and CEO of that entity. And really to kind of set the scene, if you will, on today's discussion is we're going to be diving into the idea of making your business more sellable and getting a higher price. Adi does a lot of great work with her team to, strategize and clean up and create operational efficiencies that ultimately allow a business to free up its time, its resources, its energy, and ultimately make a business more profitable and more productive as a whole. So her work really lends itself well to the conversations that we have with Bob on a regular basis surrounding, getting businesses ready for the sale. So we have a really unique intersection of conversation here for us today. So with that, let's go ahead and welcome Bob on. Say hi, Bob. It's good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Ryan. Great to see you as always.
Yeah, always good to get together, Bob. And Bob, look, I know we say I feel like a broken record on these episodes when I say it, but you're best known for helping business owners become financially independent of their business. They deserve to maximize the value of their life's work. And so a lot of these conversations that we have on this show surround that, the lead up to the sale, all that effort and that work that goes into selling a business and then what life looks like for business owners. But with Adi and her expertise coming in from Business Success Consulting Group, I'd be curious to have you kind of set the scene for us a little bit on why it is that we wanted to have Adi on and this intersection of her work with your work.
Well, thank you. That great lead in. First of all, before we even get started, I want to thank the person who introduced Adi and me not all that long ago, less than a year ago. And Adi and I have gotten to know each other very well since that period of time. But it was Julie Marquis, who was a guest on one of our previous shows, who put us together. So shout out to Julie for making that introduction. And yeah, so excited. I mean, Adi helps fast growing, successful companies achieve consistency and efficiency by documenting their processes, ensuring that they're followed, right? It's one thing to set them, it's another thing to actually follow them. And that ultimately leads to the overwhelm so many of business owners, oftentimes, I should say, myself included. We find that we seem to be a little stressed, overwhelmed at times, and she helps take companies from that chaos to clarity, and then ultimately giving them that freedom. So I really think of Adi as a process guru. And Adi, let's welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you, and hello.
Hello. Well, thank you for having me. It's a great honor to be here on this show.
Yeah. Well, I don't think anybody would argue that being able to free up your time and systematize your business leads to more productivity. I think of you as a process guru and the work that you and your team do. But why don't we just start out? Why is that important? Why is it important for me not to just play it by ear, seat of my pants, just take care of my clients best I know how? Why is process important?
There are different reasons, and we actually surveyed our clients and people that we talk to, prospective clients. That's the first question that I ask is, why processes and procedures? Why do you want to document? Because if you don't know your why, you're not going to be able to document. It's going to be something that will just be on your list forever, and it's not going to get done. And the most common answer that I hear, the word that I hear, is consistency. And that's why we say we help fast-growing companies lacking consistency achieve that consistency. And consistency can mean that each person on the team is doing their own thing. It might be that you yourself are reinventing the wheel every single time. Whatever consistency is basically consistency of operations and consistency of output. The other reason is because for training and onboarding purposes. So if you, for instance, running your own company and then you decide to hire your first employee, I remember when I hired my first one, it was like, what am I going to have them do, right? I mean, I do everything. How am I even going to let go and find a time to teach them? And then I start, okay, well, if I actually document it and have a checklist for them, or I have something documented, I will be able to actually give it to them and tell them specifically and exactly what they need to do. So in terms of training and orientation or onboarding is very important. Employee retention, if you don't give an employee the attention that they need, they will leave, right? But if you have well-documented processes, expectations are set up, they know exactly what is required from them, what is the output, etc., they will be more inclined to stay, because it also creates a different type of culture. It creates a culture of predictability, of organization. I can tell you from my own experience, I just onboarded a new team member, and she told me, wow, this is the best onboarding I've ever experienced, because it's so organized, right? It's so process, it's a system, it's so systematized. So those are benefits. And also in selling, in when you sell the business, you want to go and sell the business. I mean, think about buying a business where it's, especially if it has some kind of a technology or some kind of a knowledge that is specialized and there are no instructions. It's kind of like buying something with no instruction manual. You think you know how to operate it, but it's not the exact precise thing, or maybe you don't know anything about it. Like, I'll give you an example. I had a client that they actually hired me on the buyer side, not on the selling side. They bought a business, and they had an employee there that was there for over 30 years in that business. And they very soon realized that if that employee is going to leave, all the knowledge is walking out the door. So everything that you bought is basically walking out the door. So we came in and we documented everything. So if that employee is retiring or not there one day, they will know what to do, so they're not losing on that investment. So that's another reason.
Wow, that's fantastic. You said a couple of things that really I've seen so many times through experience, and one is just that, where you have a key employee that has all that knowledge, all that information. They make the wheels turn, and they make the business, everything just work perfectly. And the risk of what if they leave, I often find, however, it's the owner, it's the founder, it's the top of the list of the company. That's where all the information resides, and that's how everything gets done. And that person, on one hand, keeps all of that close to their vest because they do everything, they control everything, and at the same time, they are frustrated at saying, wow, I can't take a week off. I can't get away from this. What does my team do? Because they have to come in and ask me a question every time they do something. Do you find that often when you come into a business and start consulting?
I do. It really depends also on the size of the business and the maturity, because that usually happens when the businesses start to scale, and the information is definitely, that's the knowledge transfer we need to do from the owner, from the founder. Absolutely. I mean, I just got off a call before this one where we just finished a project for a client, and asked him, what did you get out of it? He goes, well, now people are not going to come to me and ask me all these questions, because they will know where to find it, right? So definitely. But also, if the business is a little bit more mature, sometimes what I found, and that's a call they had 2 calls before this one, the owner called me and he says, I want you to get with my accounting person, and I want to document how she does payroll, because if she leaves tomorrow, nobody in the company knows how to do payroll. So there is risk both ways. I mean, there is definitely the owner with all the knowledge, or the key executives with all the knowledge. And then if you hire somebody who has specialized knowledge, or they develop their own systems, and then you don't know anything about it, if they don't show up, you have a problem.
Well, I can't imagine somebody leaving and payroll doesn't get done. That would lead to some very unhappy employees who are expecting to be paid for the work that they do.
Well,
That's
in
right.
addition,
And especially if it's a complex system that somebody worked out, because you can say, okay, well, payroll, I'm just going to call my payroll company and they can do it. But if you have all these complex spreadsheets, how you do it and whatnot, you can't even simplify the process if you don't know what the process is.
Adi, these are really interesting stories, and obviously big challenges that are facing some of these business owners. In your experiences of working with some of these businesses, are there any I don't want to call them a misconception, but a common mistake, almost an easy fix that they could implement into their world, into their business to maybe address something that they've been throwing a Band-Aid on for a long time when really the issue needed to be solved at its core?
Yeah, so in terms of they can start documenting and figure out what the process is. It might be as simple as record what the person that is doing the payroll is doing, right? Or when you are doing something, record it. Like, for instance, when I do certain things that I do and I want to pass it on to my marketing lead or to my office manager, I just press record, Screencastify or Loom. I record my screen, I talk it over, send it to them, and then they start writing what it is. And then once you have it documented or at least mapped out, then you can go back and forth and correct or improve the process. But I would suggest start by identifying what is it that you're actually doing.
Let's switch ID to talk a little bit about businesses that are considering selling at some point. The founder, the owner is thinking about stepping away. And what does a buyer buy? A buyer buys predictable cash flow and hopefully increasing cash flow from a business. And if all that just resides in the head of the founder, that sure is a sticky situation. Tell me what you've seen in those areas, and how soon before a sale of a business should a founder owner really be thinking about these processes and putting things in place, systematization.
Yeah, I mean, the sooner the better, because when you're doing it, you also will increase the value because you will get more efficiency and more consistency, right? So it's kind of like selling a house and you just go into a major renovation just a month before you sell, and then you go like, oh my gosh, this kitchen is amazing, I could have enjoyed it my whole time being in the house, right? So I would suggest start definitely 3 to 5 years before exiting, but start right. I mean, I would suggest starting right away, because this is something that I think every business needs in order to operate and scale. So if you want to increase the value of the business, you need to have those processes documented. But don't wait for the last minute, because you want to make sure that those processes are being followed, that your employees know those processes, right? Because as you said at the beginning, Bob, so eloquently, it's one thing to document that, but it's another thing to implement and use them. And you want to make sure that it is part of the culture, that those processes are proven, that they work, they are mature, and not just something you just worked out right now in order to pass it on to somebody else, because that, I think, will add to the credibility of the business in the eyes of the seller, in terms of those processes. We've been doing it for several years. Here are the measurements, here are the metrics, they work, don't change anything. Here's how you do it, here are the instructions, go. If you want to have the same profit as we had, this is what you need to follow. If you want to increase, okay, good. So here are the processes. It's like an X-ray, right? You know what it looks like. You know what it looks like under the hood of a car that you're buying. If you want to add more power to the engine, you know where to add it exactly, and not start figuring it out. And if something doesn't go well, let's say, you can always go back to what was working previously, which is also a very important part of the equation when you buy a business.
Boy, thank you. That falls right in line with our thinking here at Oswego Private Wealth. We recommend 3 to 5 years before the business owner is ready to relinquish control, to start doing the planning. And the rationale that you give is just impeccable. It's brilliant. I agree with it 100%. But there are other things that we're looking at as well, which are when we're looking at the business, we want to really make sure that the business is structured properly. Maybe it's a S corp and it should be a C corp, or vice versa, or an LLC, and there are tax implications. There are lots of things that we need to do to make sure the business owner is able to step away and go on to the next phase of his or her life in a successful fashion. One of the things that we often do is we do valuations for companies, where we'll come in and for whatever reason, whether it's estate planning needs, a buy-sell agreement, people want to know the value of their business. And in that report that we put together, and I've talked about this before on the show, we will put together a report on the valuation and talk about what's the value of the business, because everybody should know that, even if they're not selling the day after tomorrow. But in addition to that, we create 12 dials that takes a look at inventory. It takes a look at other aspects of the business that can be improved. And there isn't a one of those that cannot be improved by better systems and processes. So it goes right just hand in glove with work that we do here as well.
Well, one topic that I want to explore as well with you, Adi, and it's a topic that's generated a lot of interest and a lot of conversation, especially in the last few years, surrounding the idea of quiet quitting that's been really popular, and this is among kind of employee retention. So obviously, you've got your key employees that really do a great job, and they help make the business what it is, have built it to a level of profitability, so on and so forth. Well, these days, employee retention is an extremely important factor to any successful business. So I'd love to hear your take on how it is that you work with the organizations out there to focus in on retaining some of those great employees, and maybe it's even recognizing the young rising stars even within their organization, and trying to keep them from leaving to maybe even their competition, let alone just another employer.
Right. So, there are different disciplines, that there are different trusted advisors. You have your HR, you have your leadership, you have different things that come into play that have to be in terms of the culture for employee retention. What we concentrate on is the processes and procedures. So from my perspective, if you're working in a company that is chaos, I mean, like for instance, just yesterday, I heard, I was working with a client and they have a prospect. They shared with me that they're looking at hiring somebody that she worked in a company for 4 years. Then she quit that company because she got offered a better job and she thought it would be a step up for her. But she went there and it was basically chaos. They were disorganized. People didn't know what they were doing, and there were no really like specific roles and specific responsibilities. And she ended up quitting. So that is the part in terms of like, where would you like to work? Would you like to work in an organization that values you, that is organized, that you know exactly what is expected, that you know what your output is, and you are being trained on how to actually create that output, right? That is what having well-documented process and procedures will do. And that gives the employee a sense, or the team member, a sense of security, a sense of what you're doing, a sense of there is a future here, because I can also see where I can, if I excel at this, where else can I go? And I know I can train, because you have that open knowledge of like, how can I do the other position, right? And yes, I can do it. So this is what I need to start training on so I can do it. It's just that sense of organization that gives us a lot of stability and a lot of, it takes the unknown out of it, right? It takes the, is this job still gonna be here tomorrow, right? I mean, it's basically gives you a solid foundation. And although none of us can predict the future or know what will happen, and things can happen from one day to another. I mean, we saw it in the pandemic. I mean, we didn't think about the pandemic coming in February, right? And then in March, there was shutdown, as an example, like in 2020. But it still gives you a sense of stability and security and future. And that's what we like. And, Bob, in terms of working with you, I mean, that's why is it important for business owners to work with you? Because you're doing the same. You're creating a process, a system for them, for their wealth. It's the difference between somebody just making money and have money in the bank and then invest in this or in that because that's what they heard and they think it's okay, but they don't really know what they need in order to retire. They want to give money, but they don't know if they can. They don't know what their tax liability. It's like all this confusion. But when you come in and you put all your systems there and they have the knowledge of what are their finances like? What do they need to do in order to achieve their goals? What do they need to know in order to retire in such and such? What do they need to do in order to sell their business? Then they can actually do those actions. And the same thing applies to employees. They just feel that sense of organization, lack of confusion, and security.
Well said. Well, Adi, let's talk about how your process when you work with companies. Who's a good company that should be considering working with you, and what's the process that they go through? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So we work with companies that are already established. They've been in business. They proven that they can produce, that they have a product that they sell or a service that they give, that they provide. And they are at a point where, I mean, they have several employees. I mean, the minimum, I would say 10. I mean, we usually work with a little bit bigger companies. Not a little, I mean, basically between 10 and let's say 500 employees, right? They are producing revenue, they're profitable, they're growing, they're scaling, they want to get to the next level. And they see the bottlenecks. They see that they reach a certain plateau that they can't go past that because they need to add more employees. But if like tomorrow you have to add an additional 3 employees, how are you going to train them? Or maybe they're looking at bringing on an associate, or they're trying to merge, or they acquire another company. There is some growth aspect to it that they need to help. They need help in terms of making it like now, right? So that will be the profile of the ideal client that should contact us. Once they contact us, what we do is we basically we figure out where to start. You can start, there might be different areas in the company, but where do you start? So we have a very specific analysis that we do to figure out the priorities, where to start. And we're going to start at a place that is going to give you the biggest return on investment right away. The thing that will alleviate your biggest pain points. So then you can continue from there to the next area and the next area. Once we identify that area, let's say it's sales, your sales department. Good. So we're going to we're going to create a map of the process for sales in this case, or operations, or whatever it is. And then we are going to start documenting by meeting with the people, either the owner, the founder, whomever has the knowledge, right? Whomever is the best person to clone to ask those questions. And we ask questions, we extract the information, and we write really well documented processes and procedures. We bring it to the leadership team so we can get their input and buy-in, and then we roll it out to the entire company or to whomever needs to know about those procedures, and we train them on it. So, and we actually coach the leadership team, the owner, and every stakeholder in terms of like how to utilize those processes in their day-to-day operation. One important thing is that we also implement a system to review those processes, because those processes are living documents, because they change. We all know that. We use a software today, 6 months from now we changed, and now the process is obsolete. It happens to me in my company. Every time we have a change, we go to the procedures that we have written and we change it. So there are 2 things. There is ad hoc, like it just happens, something changed, you make sure it changes. Or we have regular reviews where we actually go through all the processes and procedures and make sure that they're being kept up to date.
Well, that sounds very thorough, and I'm certain that there are many listeners to this podcast who would be very interested in talking to you and helping you help them. On that note, what is the best way to get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is a great place. So it's Adi Klevit, and look me up in LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure I'm the only Adi Klevit on LinkedIn. And you can also call or text at 503-662-2911. Of course, our website, which is bsuccesscg.com. A lot of ways to get a hold of us.
Yeah, and we'll place those on the graphics of the show and on the notes of the show too, for people to be able to get in touch with you.
Awesome.
Of course. Well, hey, Adi, we really appreciate you carving some time out of your busy day to jump on with us and unpack kind of the way that you and your team over at Business Success Consulting Group document these processes, systematize things, help companies become more profitable as a whole. We appreciate you, and love to have you back on the show maybe down the road and check in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And hey, Bob, before we wrap up today, we talk a lot about, this idea of the work that Adi does to help systematize businesses and, at the intersection of your work with preparing business owners and their business for a sale. For any business owners out there that recognize the value and maybe leveraging Adi's work, with her company as well as your services, what's the best way somebody can get in touch with you guys to just open up a dialogue?
Thanks for asking, Ryan. The best way to get in touch with us is simply just go to our website, oswegoprivatewealth.com, and there's an ability there to check us out a little bit further, and also to be able to schedule a preliminary phone call to see if there might be a good reason for us to talk further. And as Adi said, I never really talk about it, but you can always message me or talk to me and look me up on my LinkedIn website as well.
Fantastic. Well, hey, Bob and Adi, we appreciate you. And of course, folks, we want to take one final moment and thank you all for stopping by and spending some time with us on the podcast today. If you took something away from today's discussion, you benefited from it in any way, shape, or form, well, make sure you hit that subscribe button on whichever platform you checked us out on today so you don't miss out on other great conversations like these where Bob and I welcome on different guests or unpack specific wealth management topics so that you and yours can come out better for it on the other side. Before Bob and Adi, I'm Ryan. We're going to go ahead and say so long today. We appreciate you stopping by and being with us on Lessons by the Lake.